On behalf of Rutgers University and the Department of Africana Studies, I want to welcome all marking our 40th anniversary. None of tonight's program would have been possible without the diligent efforts of President McCormick, Karen Stubis, Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs, Kim Manning, Vice President for University Relations, Douglas Greenberg, Executive Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, Delia Pitts, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs, and Peter Klein, former Executive Vice Dean of SAS. We have also been supported by Nicole Pride, our PR Specialist in the Office of Media Relations, Donna Austin, and Sharnae Robinson, who leads the student chapter of the NAACP. And those are the ushers that you see who have volunteered their time. We owe all of them a tremendous debt of gratitude for transforming our initial ideas into reality. Marking this year's celebration is the theme, Africana on the World Stage, reflecting the global dimensions of the diaspora and the discipline. Tonight, we also pay tribute to the 100th anniversary of the NAACP and the major role that they have played in the enduring struggle for social justice. In profound ways, their challenge to America to honor its democratic ideals changed the quality of our lives and created an environment for social change. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination became the political catalyst for the founding of Black studies programs and departments across the country. A year later, students, activists, and faculty members at Rutgers, with a view towards democratizing the university, demanded a more diverse faculty and student body, as well as the creation of the discipline of Africana Studies. Africana Studies at Rutgers was on the cutting edge of the discipline by building a foundation based on the intellectual inquiry of Africa and the African diaspora. In doing so, it became one of the forerunners of what is now viewed as an interdisciplinary mode of inquiry. We were also one of the first to be recognized as a department, a trend that we see now in place. The primary goals of Africana Studies is to interrogate in a critical and comparative fashion the various theoretical paradigms and schools of interpretations of the African, Caribbean, and African American experience. And number two, to explore the connections between peoples of African descent and other diasporic communities. In Africana Studies, we hold the position that intellectual and political struggles are linked. In that sense, we stand with W.E.B. Du Bois, who stated in his book, Dust of Dawn, one could not be a calm, cool, and detached scientist while Negroes were lynched, murdered, and starved. We in Africana Studies are fortunate in having one of the founders of the department still with us, Dr. Leonard Bethel. And we ask that the rest of the faculty, including adjuncts, also stand. As we position ourselves to move forward for the next 40 years, we feel empowered by the visionary leadership of President McCormick. His commitment to diversity is already changing the campus environment. Two of his initiatives are filled with promise. One, the Cluster Hiring Initiative, an effort to build a more diverse faculty, and two, the Rutgers Future Scholars Program, which prepares students from local communities to attend Rutgers University. We are delighted with these initiatives, and we wish him well. It is my pleasure to introduce to you President Richard McCormick.
Thank you, Professor Tate, and to everyone, good evening and welcome. I can't tell you how glorious this crowd looks. Literally standing room only. Welcome and thank you all. Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, takes enormous pride in welcoming Benjamin Todd Jealous, President and CEO of the NAACP, to our campus. His visit comes, as Gail has observed, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Africana Studies Department and the 100th anniversary of the NAACP. Along with Department Chair Gail Tate, whom you have met, I want to thank Mr. Jealous and everyone present for helping us to mark these milestones with an extraordinary lecture and panel discussion this evening entitled Civil Rights in the Age of Obama. 40 years ago, Rutgers in the 1960s was an incomplete university. Rich in history and newly designated as the State University of New Jersey, it offered many outstanding fields of study and a talented faculty. But in failing to provide opportunity to all but a very small number of African Americans, and in limiting its curriculum, Rutgers was falling far short of its potential. The year 1969 brought change through the brave protests of African American students on all of our campuses in Newark, New Brunswick, and Camden, and through the establishment of the Africana Studies Department here in New Brunswick. The protests also led to dramatic changes in admissions, in faculty recruitment, and in the curriculum. Establishing a department dedicated to African and African American culture was a critical step forward in broadening the curriculum to match an increasingly diverse American society. Ever since, the department has brought the social sciences and humanities to bear on a range of issues related to the African diaspora, language, musicology, literature, religion, and much more. Today, Rutgers is a university that embraces its diversity, an institution that to which students come from the widest range of backgrounds, cultures, races, and faiths. And Africana Studies is symbolic of the remarkable richness of the curriculum as it has evolved over the decades. To introduce our honored guest speaker tonight is someone who has also played a vital role in the evolution of the African American community. As a youth, he was involved in voter registration drives in Southwest Georgia. As minister and president of the American Committee on Africa, he championed human rights around the globe, especially in Africa. As pastor of the Bethany Baptist Church in Newark since 2000, he established a nonprofit community organization that serves those in need, including those who have been incarcerated, and his career embraces so much, much more. I'm proud to call him my boss because he is the chair of the Rutgers Board of Governors and fortunate to call him a friend. Please welcome the Reverend Dr. M. William Howard, Jr.
Great day, huh? A great day. This is we're going to strike a blow against cynicism tonight. That's our enemy. Some of us are old enough to think we've seen it all. But when we have the privilege of seeing what the struggles of the past have wrought in the form of an excellent voice for the voiceless, we know there is reason for hope. In the Greek Bible, faith is defined as the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen with our own eyes. If we can just hold on and dream and dare to struggle, what we hope for, in the words of Jim Forbes, will tangibilitate before our very eyes. And to the English professors, I don't think there's such a word. But Mr. President, and to the deans and our great faculty, leaders of the NAACP, of which I'm proud to be a life member, all members of the Rutgers community, but especially the students, we are privileged tonight to be present together in this room. It is the best of times and the worst of times, to borrow from Dickens. This morning, one of my trusted and valued friends and I were on the phone just marveling at the sweeping changes that have taken place in our lifetime. I will tell you that if you had told me when I was growing up in Americus, Georgia, that this room would be filled with such an array of students such as this, I would have said, in the words of another famous gentleman, you lie. But indeed, sweeping progress. Robeson would be very happy, especially about the Young Scholars Program, the Future Scholars. Is that the right? Future Scholars Program. But our speaker will remind us, no doubt, that we have much unfinished business. In the Central Ward of Newark, young people for whom the Niagara movement had a great concern, a languishing, without a sense of purpose and hope. And I am so delighted that a person of a new generation, well prepared for the task, has come to lead this great organization at such a time as this. You know, we know it as a domestic civil rights organization. We know it because of Thurgood Marshall and all the great warriors. One of my favorite NAACP giants is Miss Ella Baker. But what we may not know, and Ben Jealous does, the African National Congress took its lead in terms of nonviolent civil disobedience from the NAACP that led to the Nobel Peace Prize going to its leader in the year 1961. I would say that in this day of Google, some of you are sitting now with your Blackberries, you can go and read about Ben Jealous and point out all the things I missed, because you will see so much there about him. So I won't concentrate on rudimentary biographical details. What I will say, though, by way of interpretation, is if you read what you can about him, you will see that he is a man characterized by the courage to take risk. And we are homogenized in ways that trouble me a great deal. I remember, Brother Jealous, in the 1980s, I came to Rutgers as a part of the American Committee on Africa, and I found some young people of different races lying on the floor on a hunger strike because they were opposed to apartheid in South Africa. I want to see more of that in today's student population. It is emerging here at Rutgers and around the nation. And who better than an icon of excellence, a man of achievement, a Rhodes Scholar, to come now and show us that taking risks is the only way we get there from here. He has a passion for justice. He has a passion for excellence. How many people would have been thrown out of Columbia only to go back and show them a few things by becoming a Rhodes Scholar? I met him today for the first time, and I know people. That's my business. I know people. But I only met him today. But I know the Jackson Advocate, and I knew Charles Tisdale, and I know about Parchman Prison. I should declare in front of my president tonight, I have been in Parchman Prison, and to know of your work exposing the corruption in the prison in itself speaks volumes about your fitness for this task. And let me tell you, my prayer is that you won't let us, meaning we in the NAACP, wear you down. But President Harris, where are you? I'm going to say our task is to catch his vision and to travel light, because we do have a tendency to travel heavy, especially when we go to the conventions, taking everything we own in that suitcase so we can look good every day. Ben Jealous is a man who travels light because he has a vision for the new future. I also know how Columbia looks down onto Harlem from the heights. So I feel that while we've just met, that I have been given a new lease of confidence about our future. In other words, the elders of past ages had only one dream, not that they would see Barack Obama as president, but that we would raise up leaders prepared to fight for the unfinished business that still lies ahead. The NAACP has a leader for the road ahead who, like his organization, has an irrational optimism about the prospects of America. And it is with this note that I present to you now with honor and with privilege Mr. Ben Jealous, the leader of the NAACP. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That most profound and thoughtful greeting I've ever received. So thank you. And thank you to President McCormick for having me. Thank you to President Harris, the New Jersey State Conference, for your leadership, and Presidents Joyce Simmons of Newark, Charlene Robinson right here on Rutgers campus. Where are you, Charlene? Oh, Charnay, I'm sorry. Where are you, Charnay? You stand up? Back here? All right, I want me just to know who she is. It costs $10 to become a student member of the NAACP. See Charnay and her team doing important work. And, of course, Bruce Morgan from New Brunswick. You know, we are an army of local volunteer community organizers and activists. My family's belonged to the NAACP for 5 generations. For that note, I want to thank my cousins for coming in from Montclair. It's good to see you. For 5 generations, my grandmother's grandfather was born a slave in Petersburg, Virginia, walked out of slavery right at the end of the Battle of Appomattox, went on to be a state senator, co-founded Virginia State University along the way, and when shortly before he died, he joined the NAACP, really as a charge to his children to continue the tradition of freed blacks during slavery, which was that every ounce of privilege you gained, you invested half an ounce of privilege back in continuing the ladder of opportunity that allowed you to escape. And it is very much that spirit that guides the NAACP. It's 1,200 active branches around the country. It's 36 state conferences and multi-state groupings, and our 600,000 activists in the field and online. So it is a joy to be here with you tonight. You know, I'm going to talk a bit about this moment that we're in, you know, what it is to live in 2009. I'm going to talk about what we're each called to do in our lives. And I'm going to talk about courageous conversations, what they look like and why we need to have more. I got a question for you. How many of you found your way down to Washington on January 20th? Raise your hand, please. All right. And how many of you watched on TV, watched the presidential inauguration on TV? All right. And the rest of you apparently don't own a TV, but the ones who watched it on TV are the smart ones. I don't even remember how cold it was that day. It was really cold. Anybody in Washington can tell you it was cold. And we really should have read the forecast. I was blessed to get the forecast a couple years before that day from my grandfather. I was 92 years old. And I went to him, excited because a bunch of friends of mine and I were on a roll. We were raising a bunch of money outside the campaign to mobilize black trade unionists and black media in the South in the early primaries. And I said, Granddad, I said, friends and I got together. We're having a lot of success. We are going to be part of this movement that makes this black man president. He said, black man president? So what's his name? 92-year-old black man from Southern Virginia, my granddad, Jerome Todd, Cape May, New Jersey. I said, Barack Obama. I said, Barack who? I said, Granddad, Barack Obama. It's 92, He goes, right. So, how can I put this? I support everything you do. I always have. When you were 8 and you said you want to be a neuroscientist, that's great, When you got kicked out of college, you went to Mississippi, I supported you. But let me save you a whole lot of heartache. Barack who will not become president. It's just one 92-year-old black man's opinion, but, life has taught me Barack who will not become president. So I'm sitting there at the Capitol on the platform about 20 rows behind about to become President Barack Obama on January 20th. Wind's whipping. I got my NAACP skull cap pulled down over my ears and my White House blanket around my shoulders. And I look up and I said, Granddad, you're right. It's a cold day and Barack who is president. January 20th was a day of transformative possibility. It was a day when the hopes of literally every child in this country rose. It's not just the first black man to become president, the first person of color to be president, or the first person with a father who wasn't a citizen to become president. Or some of the last name jealous, I can say this, the first person with a funny name to become president, right? I mean, this guy in New Jersey is one of the states, right? A lot of people here who understand that historically, a lot of folks have changed their names to succeed in this country. It's a big deal. He's also the first person to become president in the year when everybody just knew that a woman would be president. And the hopes of every child in this country rose. The next day, January 21st, and every day after, families woke up to a new day and the same old questions. Why does mom have to work so many jobs? There are a lot of kids in this country who are neglected, not because their parents are unemployed, but because they're underemployed. Because they have to work 3 jobs. And the streets end up raising their kids rather than them. Why can't dad find a job? Black male unemployment in New York City is 50%, they say. Why are so many people in my high school coming down with HIV? Black kids are 1 out of 7 kids in this country, and 7 out of 10 new youth HIV cases. And if you ain't handling your business on campus, you should know that there's no differentiation between the college population and the general population. Why are so many people in my town being carted off to prison for drug addiction? We had a big victory this year earlier in dropping the rock and abolishing the Rockefeller drug laws in New York. And ending a process in New York of sending addicts away to prison rather than to rehab. And we need to do that across this country. Our country, we are 5% of the people, all colors, 5% of the people on the planet, 25% of the prisoners. 5% of the people, 25% of the prisoners. Some states like California literally spends $250,000 per year for each child that they lock up. California Youth Authority, I kid you not, is $250,000 a year. But even if it's just the average is like $40,000 for putting an adult, the average for educating a child is about $8,000 per year in the public schools. So one adult being locked up is 5 kids' education that we don't have dollars for. But one child being locked up in California is like 31. So in other words, and then just take a step back, right? Children's aspirations go up. Family situations stay the same. Maybe they go down a bit with foreclosures, payday lending. Right? Payday. We're about to pass financial services regulatory reform in this country, and loan sharking will still be legal because payday lenders charge between 400 and 1,900%. In Missouri, the top rate is 1,955%. The average in the country is about 450%. What does that mean? That means that literally people are paying something 10 times worse than the top rate in sharecropping, and either a little less or a lot more than what loan sharks charge. The loan sharks charge about 520%, 10% simple interest a week. If you've known a loan shark, I've known a few. They're not the brightest people. So they just drop a zero. Right? You borrow 50, you pay me 5 every week until I get back my 50. So children's aspirations go up, family situations stay the same, or they deteriorate, and their frustrations rise. Because the distance between a child's aspirations and their family's situation is the exact measurement of that family's level of frustration. And that's where we are right now. If you're wondering why you feel sort of like your hope for this country has increased and your outrage has increased at the same time, that's why. That's why. How do we respond? We have to respond by pushing harder. We have a president who's more progressive than the Democrats in Congress. So don't blame Obama if you see him roll out a bill and you're like, what? What? That's called blue dogs. That's what blue dog Democrats do when we don't push them. Why do we need to push them? We have a window of possibility right now, and we don't know how long it is. We don't know if it's 2 years. We don't know if it's 8 years. We don't know if it's 20. And so far, we've made some tremendous victories. We started out, passed a bill called the Lilly Ledbetter Bill. It made it possible for women to be confident that they could win battles over gender pay inequities. We followed that up by pumping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into failing schools. And we went beyond that by rebuilding the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Department, which had been off the case. And a lot of what's happened in this country as far as foreclosures comes right down to regulators not doing their job, and the civil division, not even the civil rights division, which is now being led by a very inspired young black attorney, not doing theirs, not protecting lenders. And all of DOJ is being rebuilt, and now we're on the verge of real health care reform. And if you haven't called your senator, if you haven't called your congressperson, if you haven't asked your parent or your spouse or your sibling to do the same, you're failing children unborn. We got 46 million people in this country without health insurance. I got 2 of them living in my house, my adopted sister and her son. It is outrageous, and we are this close to getting meaningful health reform. We have about a week or a week and a half's window in the U.S. Congress, and we have to push very hard right now. Let me drive this point home. The president is a former community organizer. I cut my teeth as an organizer in Harlem and in Mississippi. And community organizers, old community organizers, like old football players, right? Having him in the White House being an organizer is like having Jack Kemp in the White House and leading a football team. If he has a criticism about you not doing your job, he's probably right. And the reality is that I've sat with him and talked to him, and we've talked about everything that's possible. And then he's put it right back on my shoulders and the other organizers in the room. Because he understands that he can stick his neck out about 6 inches further than we can push Congress. And he's very keenly aware of how far we've pushed Congress at any given moment. So what does this mean? It means that young people, students, need to get uncomfortable in your level of comfort. I know something about that. I was a student at Columbia University, 7-year period, and you get kicked out, kind of stretches. But in the early to the almost late 1990s. And, my first protest, I rolled up there like in my best pair of khakis, my best shirt, making an argument to the students, to the university senate about why they needed to retain full need financial aid and need blind admissions, which the dean, who had been a civil rights leader himself, said unfortunately would result in a bleaching of the undergraduate population. And they locked us out. And we sat there staring at the door like, what? So we said, we'll go get some more students. So we rolled back up there with 800 students, and they still kept us locked out. So I said to my friend Noah, I said, hey, Noah Potter, I said, Noah, is that window open? He said, yeah, the window's open. The door's locked, the window's open. I said, open it up. And he climbed through the window, and 200 of us climbed in after him. There's a whole other story to that, but that in a nutshell is why Columbia University still has full need financial aid and need blind admissions. It's easy, it's easy when you're the fifth generation out of slavery and you're at a prestigious university, the former Queens College, and you can just see sort of how life is going to be on easy street to forget about the other half of your responsibility, which is to extend that ladder of opportunity. Because to whom much is given, even if you feel like you want it all yourself by the skin of your neck, to whom much is given, much is expected. And what that means is that you have to get clear right now about why God put you here, or why the universe put you here, or why some great coincidence puts you here right now. Not next week, not 2 years from now, not, when I can go on a sabbatical after I become a professor and finish my BA, my master's, and my PhD. No, next week. Tomorrow, you've got to figure it out. Because if you don't figure it out, first of all, life is much harder. Life is much harder. Courage is much harder to come by. Success is much harder to come by. But change doesn't happen. I mean, big changes don't happen. There's a woman on my staff named Joteka Edie. I met Joteka when she was 14 years old. She joined the NAACP, when she was 16 years old. I met her when she was 16 years old. She had joined the NAACP 2 years before she was 14. When she was 16, she was working at McDonald's in Johnsonville, South Carolina, a little town where they still had segregated proms. And she saw a newspaper article at the McDonald's about a kid her age, 16 years old, who had been sent to death row. And she did a little looking around because it shocked her conscience. She figured out that our country was one of less than a dozen, I think even less than 10 at the time, who were sending children to be executed for crimes they had committed. In this country, you might become an adult by the time you were executed, but it was for a crime that you committed as a child. And she committed herself in that moment, fully aware that this was nothing new, to ending it before she died. 16 years old at a McDonald's in Johnsonville, South Carolina, she said, "Before I die, this will stop in this country. It is an outrage." And so she went to her high school, segregated proms, very separated campus. She organized the Civil Rights Kids, a code for the black kids on campus. And they went to confront the pro-life kids, code for the right-wing evangelical white kids on campus. So the Civil Rights Kids confronted the pro-life kids and said, "Y'all are hypocrites. Because you say you're pro-life, but then you celebrate when somebody's executed." And the wonderful thing about young people is that the younger you are, generally the easier it is to convince you that you're a hypocrite. So, adults spend a lot of sort of passive mental energy trying to justify clear contradictions in their beliefs, right? And so she confronted them, and they said, "You know what, you're right." And they formed a multiracial single-issue coalition on campus. It became the largest student anti-death penalty group in the country. And that's how I met her. Because, thank you. So we said to Joteka, "Joteka, you got any friends in Washington?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, tell you what, you come to Washington." I was then working as program director of the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. And I said, "You come to Washington, stay with your family friends. We'll train you how to organize national issue campaigns." She came every summer, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Along the way, she became the first black woman to be student body president of the University of South Carolina. Right? Like, Joe Wilson University, right? As the head of the student anti-death penalty group. Now think about that, right? One of the first things that comes up for a young, ambitious person when they decide to commit themselves is the fear of, "Oh my God, if I put myself out there, I'm not going to be able to achieve anything." And if your ambition was to be the student body president of the University of South Carolina, you certainly would not start a student anti-death penalty group. But she did, and it was that courage and the ability to outrage and a few skills from McDonald's that made it possible for her to convince people that what they wanted was somebody who believed in something, who had a backbone, who would do what they said they would do. That's why Cuomo could be governor of New York for 12 years opposing the death penalty, a state where 75% of people supported it. And then it became the big day. We had gotten this high sign after 7 years of fighting relative obscurity from the Supreme Court that they were prepared to abolish the juvenile death penalty if we could just get 3 more states to oppose it. See, if you haven't read your Constitution recently, if you haven't looked at your Bill of Rights recently, take a hard look at the 8th Amendment. There's a very problematic word, and. We don't know if it was just an illiterate colonial because the British standard was or, cruel or, unusual punishment. But they wrote and. And the Supreme Court, in their utter conservativeness over time, has interpreted that as it has to be both. If it's cruel but it's popular, it's totally constitutional. If it's cruel and unusual, it's unconstitutional, simply, apparently, because it's unpopular. So, the litmus test is state law. The American Bar Association, and they hate me telling this story, but it's true. The American Bar Association, in their utter sophistication, targeted 10 states, the most logical 10 states. The 10 states where the issue had been debated. There were children on the row. Our side had lost narrowly, and they said, we will bring to bear the force and the wisdom of the most powerful law firms, not just in the country, dare we say, in the world, and we will win in 3 of these 10 states. They went 0 for 10. We, scrappy activists, said, okay, well, you picked the most logical 10, so we'll go to the other 10. We'll go to the 10 states where it's technically a possibility because they don't have a stated minimum age, but they've never put a child on the row, and we'll ask them to encode their values, even though they've never discussed this issue. We sent out 2 young men, experienced organizers in their late 20s. They went 0 for 7. Joteka was coming on staff, and we had 3 states left: South Dakota, Wyoming, and New Hampshire. And so we got on the phone with the ABA. Why they were still on the phone after losing all their 10 states, I don't know. But we got on the phone with the ABA. And they said, so who you sent into those last 3 states? And we said, Joteka Edie. And they said, Joteka Edie from South Carolina? I said, yeah, Joteka Edie from South Carolina. Got real quiet. People are about to speak in code. When they're about to tell you what they really think without saying what they really think, they often get quiet because they got to pick their words carefully. And they said, if you send Joteka Edie from South Carolina to South Dakota, Wyoming, and New Hampshire, how can we put this? They'll think that people who oppose the death penalty have landed from Mars. And they will start killing kids just to spite us. Any would-be organizers, current organizers in the room, be on alert. That when a lawyer disagrees with you, when your lawyer disagrees with you, they will try to scare the bejesus out of you. And your job is to look in your heart and figure out what's the right thing to do, is to discern, as the right reverend would say. And so we discerned and we said, that's cool, we're going to send Joteka Edie. Joteka showed up with a playbook that hadn't changed much since her days in high school in South Carolina, except there were no black kids. So she found the white human rights kids in the amnesty chapters and so forth. And they confronted there were definitely white pro-life extreme right kids. And they confronted them, and they convinced them that they were hypocrites. And they went to every single state legislator, not state legislature, state legislator, every single one of them, assemblyman, senator, assemblywoman, senator, and had a conversation with them in every state. And they shored up every vote they could shore up, and they changed every vote they could change, and they won every single state. She went 3 for 3. And she hadn't turned 25 years old yet. In fact, I think she was around 22 or 23 when we won. Now, Seth Waxman, the former Solicitor General, will take full credit for winning that great Supreme Court case. But frankly, all he had to do was report to the Supreme Court that we had outlawed it in 26 states. In other words, a majority of states were opposed to it. And they were ready to do the job. It was Joteka Edie. It was a young lady working at McDonald's when she was 16 years old, committing to do something before she died. And that's what happens when you commit. And any of you, raise your hand if you participated in the Obama campaign in any way. In any way. Texted somebody, any way. You see all those hands go up when you say text, right? So, the reality is that you've already done this. It was crazy. It was like supporting Ron Paul. It was like supporting Ron Paul. I mean, I can remember showing up in rooms in 2006, and you had people who were rabidly against the war like myself, and you had estranged moderate Republicans. And I was like, well, what the heck can we do? Like, we're the 2 most powerless groups in each party. Right? We can commiserate, but how are we going to make somebody president, really? But we did. And that's what happens. If you commit, change happens, and it usually happens much faster than you think is possible. Much faster than you think is possible. The other thing that happens when you commit is that conversations that you just never thought were possible just happen. We was a case, a guy named Troy Davis. Folks paid attention to that case. Troy, raise your hand if you know who Troy Davis is or was. All right, good. So Troy Davis, I made a promise to his sister 13 years ago. I met her at an anti-death penalty conference, and she said, many people there that day, my sibling, my brother, my sister, my nephew, my uncle, death row, and they're innocent. And I said the same thing I said to everybody else who said that. I said, well, bring us something we can work with. Bring us some proof or something, and we'll do whatever we can do. So I become president of the NAACP, and she shows up. And she said, well, you remember when we talked 13 years ago? I said, actually, I do. She said, well, remember I told you that it was 9 eyewitnesses who put Troy on death row? I said, yeah. She said, well, so 7 of them. One of them, in 7, and 6 new witnesses say was the actual killer. And the other one says that they could recognize my brother from over 140 feet away on a moonless night in Savannah, Georgia. When the other witnesses said that they could recognize a white guy from 10 feet away, she could recognize a brown-skinned black man from 140 feet away. And I said, wow, she's special. She has night vision for eyeballs. I don't know if I want to mess with her, but it's like Predator. Anyways, so I said, well, we'll do whatever we can. That was my promise. That's what we'll do. So we went to the lawyers, our lawyers, right? The lawyers representing Troy Davis. They said, well, we've exhausted all of our appeals, and we're about to ask the Supreme Court to do something that they haven't done in 50 years. We think we have a 1% chance. That's optimistic, because actually they've turned down far more than 100 cases like this before, and consistently for more than 50 years. I said, wow. So, all right, well, good luck in the court of law. We're going to go have some fun in the court of public opinion. And we went to Savannah, Georgia, and we went to the DA, and the DA said, I've heard a lot about how outraged people are about this case in the Netherlands, and how outraged they are at Emory University, and how outraged they are in California, but I haven't heard anything from anybody in Savannah, Georgia. So we got some local activists and a bunch of college students, and we put 12,000 signatures from local people on his desk in 2 weeks. And 65,000 from around the country, mostly from black church folk like him. So he got the picture. He could be a hero to those church people or a villain. It was up to him. And we changed the local media just because we sat down and we talked with them. One of the things that you do when you're afraid is you assume that people are supposed to be your enemy are. But when you're really committed and you know your only choice is to win, then you sit down with people and you treat them like a human being who has a mind that could change. And you engage them in honest conversation. And occasionally they change. And for a moment, he switched back later, but for a moment, the publisher of the local paper changed. He started running some very positive stories. And then we got it on to NPR and Bill Maher and AP, and because we knew that we weren't going after the Supreme Court, we were going after their clerks. We were going after their clerks. Most powerful group of young people in the entire legal system. They decide that most death penalty cases get thrown in the trash can, and that occasionally they bring one to their boss. And so we targeted them every way we could think to get to them. And we got to them. Because in the middle of August, knowing that they weren't supposed to rule until September 30th, knowing that when they do rule in the middle of August, they're just clearing off the decks to make space for the cases they're going to accept in September, we got word that a ruling was coming down. And we braced ourselves for disappointment and what would be an execution in 2 weeks. And we won. And we didn't win because Roberts had the flu. We won 6-2. We won 6-2 with Chief Justice Roberts and Samuel Alito on our side. And Clarence Thomas, who grew up in Savannah, and very disturbingly, because the only problem with Savannah is that it hasn't changed since he was a kid. It's 3%, a county, Chatham County, 3% of the population of Georgia. More than 30% of the death row exonerations come from that county. And they're all black men. And Clarence Thomas can't tell me he doesn't know what time it is. And Scalia, who is insane. I mean, really, the guy is a deeply conflicted Christian. I say this as a fellow Christian and somebody who almost became a priest, and who believed Scalia when he said one time that he was the opposite of JFK. JFK had once said famously that if his duties as a Catholic ran up against his duties as a president, the duties as a president would trump his duties as a Catholic. Scalia said just the opposite. He said, if my duties as a Catholic ever run up against my duties as a Supreme Court justice, I'll quit the bench. And then Scalia came out with a decision, right? Because there's this thing called the doctrine of life. Scalia came out with a decision that said, what? This court has never stated that we would not execute somebody with a compelling case of evidence, a compelling case of innocence that has never been heard by a court simply because, back up. He said, what? We've never said that we would not execute somebody who had exhausted all of their procedural appeals, all of their guaranteed appeals, simply because they have a compelling case of evidence that no court has heard. Think about that. How fundamentally un-American it is to say, we're going to execute you, not because we know that you're guilty. In fact, we've heard that there's a compelling case, and you may not be guilty, but you've run out of appeals. Next. And that was the substance of his argument, and it's morally reprehensible. There's no biblical justification. In fact, it contradicts everything that his church stands for. Courageous conversations often happen, so whether it's with that publisher at that newspaper, or whether it's with that DA, or whether it's with that judge, or whether it's with Bill Maher, they often happen in strange places and when you least expect them. I was an organizer in Jackson, Mississippi. So organizer in Jackson, Mississippi, the governor was trying to shut down 2 public historically black colleges and make one a prison. And it looked like he had the power to do it. And so I got down there and I said to the lawyer at Northern Mississippi Rural Legal Services, I said, what exactly am I supposed to do? And he wrote it down on a napkin, he slid it over to me, turned around and said, put the fear of God in the judge, put the fear of God in the governor. I said, okay. I said, excuse me, I just got down here from New York. How am I supposed to do that? He said, just do what you did in New York City. I said, in Mississippi? He said, yeah. I said, okay. Okay. So, we set about, we organized street protests, sit-ins, jail. Byron Dale Beckwith had just been put in prison for killing Medgar Evers. The Klan literally held a press conference and said that they were going to kill one of the 4 leaders of the march we were planning. Death threats started coming hot and heavy. And we decided that we needed white allies, that we needed white students to join us for this march. We knew we were going to have upwards of 10,000. We ultimately have 15,000 students. It's been the biggest marches Mississippi had seen in decades. And we needed some white students in the march. And so we decided, if you can find a white liberal in Mississippi, best chance is Earth Day. So, I'm a native of California. I was shocked that there was Earth Day in Mississippi. I was like, really? All right. So we, sent up students to Earth Day at the various campuses, including at Mississippi State University. Now, to get to Mississippi State University, you have to drive all the way up the highway that Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner were killed on. 40 miles past Philadelphia, where the sheriff set them up and called the Klan to get them killed. Into the piney woods in Mississippi. When you get deep down south, everything goes upside down, and the northern part of the state is actually the most intolerant. The southern areas along the water, whether it's river or ocean or Gulf, tend to be more cosmopolitan, more progressive. So here we were in the northeastern corner of the state, in the piney woods. I sent two young men up there, and they were supposed to speak about 2 o'clock at Earth Day. And they kept pushing them off. So, after the next, after the band, after the other band. So at 11 o'clock at night, after the second encore of Sweet Home Alabama, after the crowd had definitely changed, and the Kappa Alpha Order that was co-founded by Nathan Bedford Forrest, and was basically the Klan's fraternity, had showed up and was partying to Sweet Home. They put my boys out there, right? They put my organizers out there. And before they could say, and join us at the march, they started chanting, get a rope. And at 11 o'clock at night, 40 miles past sort of the, Philadelphia, 60 miles past where Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner were found in the bogs, you take them seriously. And so they hopped in their car and they hightailed it back to Jackson. And they called me from the Waffle House at about 1 a.m. If you know, it's a good place. Oh, you know. Called from the Waffle House at 1 a.m. They said, Ben, we got to talk. And I wasn't sleeping well. Just a couple of days before that, the police had been to our house and because we were getting death threats. And they did a whole scan of the house, and they basically came back and said, well, there's bars on the windows. There's no insulation in the walls. The only safe place for you to sleep is in the bathtub. And it's a small bathtub. So, but don't worry about it. The only thing that's probably going to happen, listen to that sentence, the only thing that's probably going to happen is they will drive by and throw a Molotov cocktail through your window. So just sleep light and keep a wool blanket next to you. Right? In like the late spring, early summer in Mississippi. The thing you want is a wool blanket, right? So I wasn't sleeping well anyway. So they said, come to the wall. I was like, great, get the hell out of this house, excuse me. So I ran over there. I said, what's up? They said, we got to talk. I said, what's going on? They said, we got death threats from students who looked like they wanted to lynch us. I said, really? And just that moment, we all kind of looked around. We realized, you've been to Waffle House. You know, Waffle House is sort of a class cut, sort of a working class place. Often down south, you'll see blacks and whites working behind the counter, close proximity, very un-Southern things. Blacks and whites in and out all day. We were the only black folks in the restaurant. It was now approaching 2 a.m. We've been getting death threats. And there's a man staring at us from the counter. And he's wearing, like, what my grandfather would call, he was 92-year-old, it may not be the most politically correct thing, but he'd call a Cuban tuxedo. It was like a white Hawaiian shirt with, like, ruffles on it, and it's not tucked in. And that's significant because Mississippi is a right to carry state, right? So with $100 and no felonies, you can carry a concealed firearm. So when the man has a blousy shirt hanging down, past his butt, you have reason to be concerned. So he's staring at us, and Waffle House is basically there to facilitate obesity, right? So they give you your to-go food in grocery bags, right? Big brown paper grocery bags. So he walks over to us, and he looks at us, and he goes, y'all the boys I've been seeing on television. And we called each other boys. But I was from California, one guy was from Chicago, the other was from St. Louis, the other was from New Orleans. None of us were accustomed to be called boy by some old white man in Mississippi. We were the only black folks in the restaurant, and we've been getting death threats. So we said, yes, sir. What can we do you for? And he said, hold on a second. And I will, for the rest of my life, remember this in stop frame animation. Turns around slowly, right? We no longer see his shooting hand, right? Turns around slowly, puts down his bag, and he swings back around. Two of the guys, one more had come over with me. So the two organizers, one other guy, myself, two of them were football players, and they were about to tackle this guy. And I was like, I said, just hold up. He turns around and said, well, I just want to shake your hand. And part of what I'm about to say next, this is exactly how it happened. He said, if I had been born a nigger, I'd be mad as hell too. This man has called me boy and called me nigger, and I'm getting a warm feeling inside, right? So, it's a grammatically challenging individual I met a very long time. He said, I've been mad as hell too. He said, y'all stopped fighting 25 years ago. I have no idea why. He said, and you should understand, he said this with gold rings on every single finger. He said, I own the used car lot right down Highway 49. If you need anything, if you need money, if you need a car, if there's any way I can help, you just come see me. And so the next morning at 8 a.m., I sent two fellas down there to get his check. It was exactly the balm for their soul that they needed. They thought they knew where to find an ally. And they thought they knew who was going to kill them. And they were definitely wrong in each account, and they may have had it just completely reversed. I take that lesson with me every day. I've sat in the office of CEOs and had said, was there any other way I can help you? And said, well, would you mind calling the governor of Georgia about a guy named Troy Davis? Let me tell you about the case. And just asking him to give him a day in court. No problem. That guy was a white Southern CEO of a major corporation. Had a reason not to irk the governor of Georgia so his company could do business there without interference. He picked up the phone and called him. Tomorrow I'm having a meeting with one of the 3 largest employers in the country because we had gone to them and said, we don't like this, we don't like that, we don't like the other, and they said, understood. Is there any way we can work together? And we said, well, your country has a blanket ban, essentially, on formerly incarcerated people working for you. We would like to see that ban reduced. I said, oh, well, my executive vice president's a born-again Christian. He's frustrated by the issue, too. Let me introduce you guys. Maybe we can do something together. And tomorrow we will be there with the White House, the RNC, leaders of Republicans and Democrats in Congress and the Senate, white Christian, far-right evangelicals, black progressive Christian leaders, all sitting around with their 3 top executives, everybody just shy of the CEO, walking through how we're going to do this partnership together. I'm here tonight. I came to Rutgers, and this is a fabulous university. This is Paul Robeson's school. This is one of the most diverse campuses in the country. It's 3rd behind 2 black colleges for sending the most black doctors forward. Young people off to med school to become doctors. And I stand here fully aware that in Mississippi, where I cut my teeth, the entire black political machine, the most successful one in the country, they have more black elected officials in Mississippi, number, not per capita, number in a state of 3 million people than any state in the country, was built by black doctors. I'm here tonight to say to you, you've got to push harder now. We can win much bigger victories than you feel are possible on any sort of given frustrated day. But we only win by committing, by getting engaged, by having faith. The chairman said, faith is the evidence of things not seen and the essence of things hoped for. It's repeated in the Bible twice. It's once in the Old Testament and again in the New Testament. If there's a message God wants you to get, in other words, out of that book, if you're a person of faith, any, thing in the Abrahamic tradition, that is it. And it's there in every faith. And it's there in every system of ethics. You've got to be willing to believe in something greater than what you can see in front of you if you ever want to see anything better than what you see in front of you. For 100 years, the NAACP, and I'll close on this, has done one thing very, very well. We dream bold dreams. We break them down into achievable steps. We convince other people to join us, and we fight until we win. And it may take 50 years like it did to shame the country out of the process of lynch mobs. It may be short, 20 years like the legal campaign to outlaw Jim Crow, using Jim Crow's referees on Jim Crow's courts by Jim Crow's rules. But we always win. And right now, young people in this room, many of you, I think, probably felt the way I did when I was 20 years old at Columbia University. Friend celebrating his 21st birthday. And in the sort of faux black nationalist spirit of the times, Tribe Called Quest and Public Enemy and all that, somebody poured libations. First to our friend in celebration of his birthday. Then to our friends who we loved so dearly, who had died before we got there. And then in celebration of one more of us surviving to 21. As if that should be an accomplishment in the greatest country on earth. Or any country on earth. We have, in other words, we had come of age just in time to find ourselves the most murdered generation in this country and the most incarcerated generation on the planet. We have big dragons to slay in this century. We can slay them like we have slayed bigger dragons before. But we have to name that pain, we have to commit to curing it, or we condemn our children to living the same frustrating existence that has characterized so much of our lives. So I'm here to say thank you for having me. Thank you for spending your time here tonight. Thank you for the good work you've already done, so many of you, to break the 232-year-old color line on the White House. And thank you for the change that you will make that you haven't even decided to make yet, because you still haven't answered the one question that you got to answer before next week. Why are you here? What change are you going to make before you leave this planet? Thank you, and God bless.
We want to thank Mr. Ben Jealous for that engaging, inspiring, insightful, and challenging address. Thank you, Mr. Jealous. My name is Edward Ramsamy, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Africana Studies. And it's my pleasure to moderate a panel discussion to bring home to New Jersey and to Rutgers some of the broader challenges that Mr. Jealous spoke about. Frantz Fanon, one of the African diaspora's foremost political thinkers, wrote, "Each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it." And after hearing the challenging address by Mr. Jealous, the youngest leader of the NAACP at 36 years of age, this organization that has broke so many barriers and still faces so many challenges ahead, as Mr. Jealous outlined in his conclusion, the leadership of this organization is in very good hands as it seeks to discover its mission for the 21st century and fulfill it. It will not betray it, I am sure. It's my pleasure to bring to the podium some distinguished members from the New Jersey community who have been intimately involved in the activities of the NAACP in New Jersey. And part of our wisdom in doing this, and this was Professor Tate's idea, is that there's wisdom in the slogan, think globally, act locally. And Mr. Jealous pointed out some of the national challenges that we face as a nation, and we want to reflect for a minute on what sort of is occurring here in New Jersey. So what I will do is I will just introduce the panelists, call them up, and then we'll go through a brief reflection on Mr. Jealous's challenges, and then we'll open the floor for questions and answers. So our first panelist is Mr. James E. Harris. He's the president of the New Jersey He's the president of the New Jersey chapter of the NAACP. He has received numerous awards for his social activism, his work in social policy and education, and also he's the Associate Dean of Students at Montclair State University. Our next panelist is Ms. Sharon Robinson Briggs. Ms. Briggs is the current mayor of Plainfield and the first woman to be elected to that position in Plainfield. She's a longtime activist with the NAACP. She served in the New Jersey executive of the NAACP, has started a number of exciting initiatives at Plainfield, which if I go through, we'll be here for another, Mr. Ben Jealous will miss his train. So, but thank you very much, Mayor Briggs, for coming tonight. Mr. Theodore Carrington. He serves on the Environmental Justice Committee and is the chair of that committee for the New Jersey chapter of the NAACP. He has done some tremendous work on this much-needed area of environmental activism in New Jersey, and he was just commissioned to serve on a 15-member state Environmental Justice Council, a panel that was formed by the governor to probe problems of pollution in New Jersey, a much-needed area of work. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Carrington. Rutgers is fortunate to have a very active student chapter of the NAACP. And it's my pleasure to welcome Kicheri Ujoki, who was a very active member of the student group and chaired a number of important initiatives and spearheaded a very important commission on retention of students at Rutgers. Thank you very much. So we'll just go through the panel, and then we'll open Mr. Jellis has graciously agreed to address your questions. So, Mr. James Harris.
Good evening. Good evening. Giving praise and honor to the Almighty for the privilege of being here at Rutgers this evening. To President Ben Jellis, it's awesome to have you in the state of New Jersey. Welcome on behalf of the 41 branches, including the New Jersey State Prison Branch, the 7 college chapters and 15 youth councils. We're very proud of you. To Reverend Dr. William Howard, my good friend and colleague for many years, to Dr. McCormick, a true lifetime member of the NAACP. Thank you for what you are doing at Rutgers. And of course to Dr. Tate, who has endured the storm. Thank you for making this program possible and inviting me, and to all of the distinguished faculty and most importantly the students who are here tonight. I am so delighted to be here. But before I begin, you know the NAACP is a volunteer organization, and any organization in order to be successful must have supporting members. So with all of the leaders of the NAACP in the room tonight, would you please stand? First, I want my members of the executive committee to please stand. Then we have the presidents of the various branches. Would you please stand? And with all of the members of the NAACP in the house, would you please stand? Thank you very much. I have followed the development of the Africana Studies program because while we talk about 1968 and what gave rise to the Africana Studies program, let's understand that it was out of protest. Dr. King's assassination brought a whole lot of things to fro. And I remember Joe Brown and his colleagues who took over Rutgers University in Newark and closed that sucker down and insisted that in order to move forward, the university had to change the way it did business. And then, of course, we know about what happened with the creation of Livingston College and what happened at Douglas College and what happened all over this country. But the struggle of the Africana Studies program at Rutgers is kind of parallel with the struggle of the NAACP. Everything that it has won has been hard fought for. I can remember when people tried to get rid of the program before it got started. We had advisors who told students that you wouldn't want to major in that. What are you going to do with that major? And I can remember 2 years ago when I got a call from the students here at Rutgers who said they're trying to get rid of the Africana Studies. And I remember meeting for a while with the assistant dean and the dean for almost a half a day. And I'm so happy to hear that the concessions that came out of that meeting as the department was being bifurcated, that there were 3 senior faculty members who were committed to that department in order to make it grow. And I'm told that, Dr. Tate, you're in the process of searching for 3 outstanding scholars from throughout the world in order to make the program what it should be. And I want to thank the students for making that call. I also want to recognize the fact that we're not finished yet with what needs to be done at Rutgers University. It is very important that we have the Future Scholars Program. And let me just say, this is an incredible announcement that was made by Dr. McCormick at our meeting about 5 years ago. He said, if we can, how many? 3 years ago. Seems like a short time. But he said, we will take 50 students from Camden, from Newark, New Brunswick, and we thought he was finished, and he said Piscataway. And we will find them in the 7th grade, and we will tutor, mentor, and coach them. And for every one of those students who will graduate from high school, they will be admitted to Rutgers University on a full scholarship for the full term of their stay. That's a commitment. I also followed this program because I was the president of the New Jersey Association of Black Educators for 8 years, and some of my other colleagues in that struggle are here tonight. And we tried to get the faculty at Rutgers together. It was difficult to get the faculty at Rutgers together because folks didn't trust each other. They wouldn't come together. And so I think about the celebration of Mr. Obama in the White House. And by the way, we believe that the road to the White House for Mr. Obama was paved by the NAACP. Last year this time, we were doing 3 things. Every NAACP branch in the country was doing 3 things. We were doing voter registration, we were doing voter mobilization, and we were praying. Because all of us realized that Mr. Obama became a target from the minute he announced that he could raise more money than the traditional parties, and that we had enough crazy people in this country who would want to make the headlines to take him out of here. And we're still not satisfied that that's not a thought in an awful lot of people's mind. But I also want to just say in closing on my few remarks that the students, you make all the difference in the world. As we celebrate 40 years, we celebrate 40 years of taking students who had no real opportunity to go to college, and they've graduated and not only become leaders in their own communities in this state, but I dare say the United States and the global community. That's something to celebrate. And I hope that as those folks who are in the room, and anybody who's graduated from the program over the last 40 years, would you please stand up? Thank you very much. I believe that it's your responsibility to give back and to make sure that this program lasts for another 40 years. And I want to say to all of the folks here, the NAACP stand in full support of all of the things that you intend to do, all the things that you want to do. And I hope that as we move forward, that connection with the community will be strengthened, because I think there's always a temptation for folks to get very secure in their positions on campus and to forget that the problems that they are duty-bound to solve are right outside of their doorstep. We ought not to be comfortable having Rutgers University in Camden, one of the poorest cities in the United States of America, coexisting in the wealthiest state in the country. There's got to be something happening as we build new facilities to bring those young people into the university. But our commitment in the state right now is economic rights. So as we look at the expansion that Rutgers is going to do, Dr. McCormick, we're looking for some African Americans on those jobs. We're looking for African Americans to be in those unions that are sometimes very racist and very non-diverse in this state. Because at the end of the day, if all the folks get all the education that they want and they can't get a job or can't grow their business, what does it mean? Because real quality of life in the United States of America, and I dare say in New Jersey, is about the job that you do, the money that you make, and the quality of life that you can secure. It is unacceptable It is totally unacceptable that our communities are so infested with drugs, guns, and gangs. And I hope that the scholars in the Africana Studies Department at Rutgers will give some attention to how do we solve these problems and what type of resources can be brought to bear so that everyone in this country can have a quality of life regardless of their geography, regardless of their gender, regardless of where they come from. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Harris. Mr. Carrington.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Dr. Tate for inviting me, and certainly an honor to be on the panel with Mr. Jealous. And I'm going to give a little reflection about myself personally. I'm born and raised in New Brunswick. And as a youngster, my backyard touched Douglas College. And we have come a long way, because when I was a little boy, I did not see anybody of color on that campus. It just did not exist. And this is an opportunity for me to talk about an issue that I think time has come, because I think that this is an issue that affects everyone, no matter what your challenge in life is, where your station is. And the issue is, for me, is the environment. And I don't know if people understand the impact that it has on your life. You know, if you make $1 million and you're sick, it doesn't make any difference. Or if you're poor, certainly it doesn't make a difference. If you're sick, you're sick. And what I find that the environment is kind of the final frontier for civil rights, because, you know, we know about, you know, labor problems, we know about education problems, we know about racism exists in housing and, you know, driving while black and labor and the criminal justice system. But there's the common thread that runs through us all is that, I don't know how else to say it, but we're slowly being made sick. There's a lot of drugs and stuff that pharmaceuticals give you, but we probably have a great opportunity to have a much better, healthier life if we take more attention about what the environmental factors are. And in communities of color, it's pretty much unbelievable. We were on a tour today in Newark. You know, and I don't know if people know that the largest mound of Agent Orange in the world is located right in Newark, where people live. You know, there's areas in this country that are, especially where people of color and poor working class people live, where at one point down in Alabama, people had to have gas masks because the air was so bad down in Anniston, or up in Buffalo, New York, where a man said to me one time, when I was a kid, I never knew what color the snow was going to be because he lived near an M&M factory, and the dyes were always, during the wintertime, the different dyes colored the snow. We have an opportunity now, and we need to take this opportunity to not let the environmental community not include environmental justice, because that's the major impact that it has on people of color directly. We can talk about global warming, we can talk about climate change, but those things, the way that it's presented, is about to come. But what's happening in our communities, our children are sick. Our children have asthma in an epidemic proportion. We know that our children don't do well in school when they don't feel well. Coronary problems are in an increase. And we're getting ready to have a major climate change bill. And many people in the environmental justice community feel that the bill doesn't include issues that are directly affecting us. And this is an opportunity. Hopefully I can talk to some of the young people, because there has to be additional people of color in the environmental field. It has to be additional people of color to bring this message to our communities, because we are not paying attention. And while we're not paying attention to what's going on, others are making decisions for us. And when they make decisions for us, it's not in our best interest. And you can see that where incinerators are being placed, where they want to take and put a brand new power plant in Linden and literally tell people they're going to pipe it 100 miles out to sea where the carbon comes off and it won't affect anybody. And if you believe that, I have a bridge for you. So I just want to thank everybody, and I have some good information that I think that you should know. I think that we all need to take a special notice to the final factor. It's the planet. It's not a joke. 50,000 people, and that's only what they're able to identify. Many states don't even report. 50,000 people a year die in the United States because of diesel emissions. 2,000 in New Jersey alone. That's more people than die than gunshots. People don't know that. And it's not getting, well, the air is getting cleaner, but the impacts on our community is getting much more intense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrington. Mayor Robinson Briggs.
Thank you so very, very much. Well, good evening, everyone. To Dr. McCormick, Dr. Tate, to Mr. Zealous, as well as our State Conference President, Mr. Harris, to our moderator of this session, to all of the panelists, to all of the educators who are here tonight, Dr. Bethel and Reverend Dr. Howard, as well as all of the NAACPers who are here, friends, also to our Assemblyman Chivakula. We thank you also for joining us this evening. To the Anderson family, I know I saw you a minute ago when I was peeking over. Where are you? Thank you for being here. Those were some of my friends when I lived in Piscataway. To all of you, and I see some Plainfield area NAACPers, I bring you fond, fond greetings on behalf of the city of Plainfield, where I serve as the mayor of Plainfield. And I have to tell you that all the mayors before me, well, let me see here. It was Mark Fury, Al McWilliams, Everett Lattimore, Harold Mitchell, and several others. But we were alike in the fact that we want to serve people, but we're different in the fact that I'm the first female mayor for the city of Plainfield. Thank you. Which had its challenges and still does. But I want to first commend everyone associated with the Department of Africana Studies, because that has brought such diversity to this university. I really commend you on your work, because as my colleague here said, when I lived in Piscataway, I didn't see many folks that looked like me that was up here, except for in one area. I also had opportunity to be on the Douglas campus, and in fact, that was with an Upward Bound program. Okay. And we lived in Lippincott and Katzenbach, those dorms. And we were up here for the summer. Now, every summer I was away from home, so I don't know anything about being home during the summer months. But we did have an opportunity to get together, and it was kind of like busing in. It was almost like one of those fresh air fun programs. You bus in the black kids and show them around and show them how, you know, things could be and so forth and so on. So it was a good program. Happy 40th anniversary to your department, and many, 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 many years. Happy 100th anniversary to the NAACP. We've worked hard for that distinction, and I'm so proud that we're still going strong. If there's anybody among you who ever tells you the NAACP is dead, what do they do? We are positive proof. The NAACP is strong, vibrant. We are doing many things, and not just the state of New Jersey, but throughout this country, and we will continue to do so. Why? Because as long as there's a need for folks to understand about equal rights, we're going to be here for people. Thank you. Now, I can tell you, as African Americans and people of color, my position is that we have a very distinct obligation to give back to all people, and especially to those in our community. We have to learn how to continuously reach back and pull those behind us up. We have to continuously embrace our young people, and not just with the rhetoric of saying they're our future, but they are coming behind us. It is our mandate to make certain that we make a way for them, just as others made a way for us. We wouldn't be here. That's true. It's true. I'm going to give you a quick story and tell you about some real early beginnings of myself, and you'll understand where I come from in terms of my whole motto is about unity, unification, people always working together for the betterment of and the good of everyone. As a young child, as a very, very young child, well, my beginnings started in New York City. I actually I grew up my first 11 years in the South Bronx. So if any of you know anything about New York and about the South Bronx, you know that wasn't a magnificent place to live, but it was home, nevertheless, it was home. My parents were hardworking individuals. My father was an engineer. My mother was a homemaker, but she would go out and do some different things, earning a day's pay here and there. And so as a young kid, I lived and hung with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And really with being with my grandmother, that's where I learned about the value of working together and doing things for other people. I'll give you a couple of examples. We would do the voter registration drives. Picture me being a 4-year-old standing out on a corner in the South Bronx in the evening waving voter registration forms saying, "You gotta vote because we need some better things for the kids." Okay? People would register because they thought I was cute. And it was wonderful. It worked. It was my grandmother's gimmick. She pushed me out there, and that's what we did. Another thing would be if, in fact, and my grandmother was a real community-oriented person, and if, in fact, there was a situation whereas we would find out, oh, the Johnsons down the street or the Mickens up the street, they can't afford to pay their rent this month. And you know what? Nana would get on the phone, call everybody she could think of, and everybody would come together and put together a dinner. The panelists probably know about, maybe not you, baby, because you're a little bit younger than me. But on this end of the panel, you may know about those things, those dinners that community folks will put together to raise money to help families in need. And so my job at those dinners was twofold. One, I'd have to pull out, as soon as Nana said, we have to do a dinner, I have to pull out a can of Crisco oil, the hard stuff. That can was almost as heavy as I was. I had to pull that out, get the flour, the eggs, the milk, and my job was to make the biscuits. So at 5 years old, I was making homemade biscuits for everybody and everybody. And together, we put together these wonderful dinners. But the bottom line was really to be able to give back and to help people, because that is what we need to do in this life. So that was my early beginnings, and it stuck with me. It stuck with me on every level. As I got older, went on to college, I joined different groups, and I started a scholarship association because why? I felt that we needed to be able to help people who need a little extra boost. As the time went on, and I would hear certain things on the radio. You know, sometimes you're riding in the car, and all of a sudden something is said on the radio that sparks your attention, and whatever you had planned to do that day, it's over. You're going to do something totally different because something really hit you hard. And I remember this one day. I was riding, and I was on the turnpike, and I was supposed to be meeting my sister. She was coming up from down south, and we were going to hang out for that weekend. And then I heard Alton Maddox on my radio. I'm like, who is that? Interrupting the song I was singing. And then I heard Reverend Al Sharpton and a few others, and they were speaking about some different things that had been going on. Before I knew it, I was calling my sister saying, listen, you don't have to come this weekend, but you come this time instead, because we're getting ready to go over to New York and get on a bus because there have been some gunshots, and we need to get out there and rally and march for the benefit and the good of people so that certain things don't occur anymore. For instance, like with regard to Amadou Diallo, you know about that young man, the 40 or 41 shots that he encountered, unfortunately, an unarmed man. There were other situations. We marched on Washington with regard to Roe versus Wade. Just a lot of different situations, whereas we decided, you know what, we're going to get together. So here was, in my younger days, I met up with a couple of gentlemen who were also marching with Reverend Al Sharpton and some others, Mr. Salam Ismail and others. And when we first met, my sister and I met Mr. Ismail, we were dressed in such a way that when we showed up for the march, and this was on Florio's house at the time he was the governor. And when we showed up for the march, they were like, who are these two foo-foo sisters? Who sent you here? Why are you here to march? And we explained, we're here for the good of the people because we want to make sure that everybody's rights are going to be upheld and nobody's rights are going to be violated. So to this day, I'm trying to be calm sitting up here, but I am like excited about this whole thing. But to this day, I enjoy getting out to the streets, having the marches, having the rallies, having the petitions, getting thousands of people together for a common cause. And that's what we do. That's what the NAACP does. We get people together. And you heard Mr. Jealous talk about how, you know, down south getting the petitions and so forth and so on and rallying the troops. That's what makes for good civil rights advocacy. And that's what we do collectively. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to challenge you all, and particularly our young people. I want to challenge you. Pick something that you wholeheartedly believe in and do everything in your power to see it through. Take a challenge. Set a goal. And really, really stick with it. Not just today, but make it your life's goal. Because you see, I didn't always want to be mayor of a municipality. I thought I was going to be an attorney. I thought that was going to be the way that I would help people in need. And then as life evolved, I became very, very involved in the NAACP. And then I became involved in the Board of Education, because parents and grandparents were coming out and saying, you know what, my grandbabies, my kids are coming home with flyers, and we don't know how to help them because there's no books for the schools. And Al Hester is here from the Plainfield area, NAACP, and I know he'll remember those conversations because we were trying to decide who is going to infiltrate the Board of Ed, who's going to run to become a board member. And different people decided they would do it, and at the last minute they couldn't. And so then I did. And in doing so, I had a chance to really see what was happening with the Board of Education. You see, and even now as a politician, and I'm calling myself a politician because most folks will think of me as a politician and elected official, but I think of myself as a messenger of God. I think of myself as being here for a mission of God, to do God's work for God's people. And when that mission is over, it's a done deal. I'll move on and find another way to help people. But I'm telling you that again because I want you all to really, really take a challenge and step outside of what you usually do, what's comfortable, and do something really good to benefit other people. Now, I'm going to end by telling you 3 things that that really made a big difference for me in life. And one was, I told you my father was an engineer, and he's gone on to heaven. But because of the things that happened to him in his life when he lived down south and then in New York, he didn't believe in voting. All my life he told me there's no need in anybody voting. Things are already decided by folks other than folks who look like us, so there's no need to vote. There's no need to register. But over time, we had several conversations, and I had an opportunity to convince him that we do need your vote, Dad. We do need you to register. And I want you to know, when I marched that man in to the Board of Elections to register to vote, I was crying, and he couldn't understand why. But I felt such pride and such exhilaration because there was a real personal difference, not just in my family, but for everybody's family. Because you see, as we vote collectively for people who we feel will do things to have a positive effect on our families, we have made a positive role for our community. And so that was a big plus for me, to see my father register, and then he voted, and he voted in every election. The second thing that I think made a real big mark for me was when I was president of the Plainfield area NAACP. A young lady came in. She lived in New York, and she came in. She was looking for some assistance because she had actually attended college at my alma mater, which was Seton Hall University in South Orange. And she had a problem with one instructor. And she was there on an art fellowship. And because she had that problem, her fellowship was taken from her. And she was basically kicked out of school. And so I told her that, you know what we will do. I said, we have to do this in a very structured-like way. But what we will do is we will speak to the folks at the university, and we will ask for their assistance to get you back into school, and we'll ask for their assistance that since your fellowship is gone, for them to pay for the rest of your studies, and then we will send them a thank you letter. Now, she looked at me like I was crazy because she said, is it that simple? Is it that easy? I said, well, you know, I have to believe that people really do want to do the right things by us. We just have to show them the way, give them a back door, and convince them that that's the way to proceed in life, to help people. So long story short, we did go to Seton Hall. We had about 4 or 5 or 10 meetings. Took a little longer to convince folks. But they did actually reinstate her as a student. She couldn't get her fellowship back, but they did actually pay for the rest of her studies, which was another 2.5 years there at Seton Hall. She has graduated, and she works at a museum in New York, and every once in a while we hear from her. So that's a true success story as to how we help one another. And the last thing, of course, is what I'm doing right now in terms of being mayor of the city of Plainfield. Because, again, I feel that my role there is one of being able to assist people, to help folks in any way possible. And I have to tell you that although we didn't have at the high school that I attended, we didn't have an Africana Studies department. We had an African American history class, and that kind of helped us learn about one another and how to help everybody. So I hope that you'll take the comments that I made tonight and go back this evening and think about ways that you can challenge yourselves, ways that you can continue to work with this Africana Studies Department, ways that you can, if you're not a member of the NAACP, that you can become motivated to do so, to help people. And just remember that we advocate for everybody's rights. It's not a black organization. We want to do the right thing for all. And I thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Briggs. And our final panelist is Ms. Ogoji.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for everyone coming out today. I want to thank Dr. Tate, the Africana Studies Department, and everyone sitting here with me. I really do appreciate everything that you've done thus far and continue to do for the community. For me, I guess I would say that I'm the voice of the just graduated students here at Rutgers University. The Africana Studies Department for us has done so much that I cannot even state. The Africana Studies has created a part of what our identity has been and helps with the transition for what we do for the future. For me, I remember my freshman year where they put a Black Experience in America class on my schedule, and I couldn't even fathom what it was about. What is it going to tell me about? And I mean, granted, I knew it was about Black people, but I didn't know what else it was really going to teach me besides what I've already learned in middle school and high school. I also, during that time, took the time to start looking for an organization to take part in. I went through several different organizations over the 25 organizations we have here in the Black community, and I ended up in NAACP. Taking both things at the same time actually encouraged me to take part into what the community had to offer, understand how to help others, and really be a motivator for what the community must be, whether it was there or not. The Africana Studies Department gave me the opportunity to understand where our people have come from and where we can go. The passion that we can take and drive to make sure that we can accomplish anything we set our minds to. And that's exactly what we did with the RU-NAACP. As the RU-NAACP being its largest in New Jersey, we have taken strides to make sure that there are more African Americans who are sitting in this university and graduating, meaning that our high school outreach our high school outreach took it from having students just coming in to actually targeting different areas, making sure that the underprivileged were coming to our high school outreach, and changing from 35% of the people who came to attend Rutgers to 90% of those students going to a college and a university and graduating. We made sure that we participated in the voting registration. We made sure that we stood up for the rights of the women's basketball team to make sure that everyone understood why it should not be the nappy-headed hose, why that comment was not acceptable. We made sure to educate the community about Agena 6 and taking part in that rally, as well as educate people when someone decided to put a noose in someone's room here at Rutgers University as to why that was not acceptable, why we should stand up against it, and why it might not continue. We've made so many different strides to understand who we are by taking part in stuff in the Africana Studies Department to continue to develop and educate the community. I remember, the saying of like each one teach one or reach one teach one, and I think that with coupling with the NAACP, the Africana Studies, and Rutgers University, we have gotten that opportunity to go forth and be able to educate not only the Black community, but the community at large, to understand that everything is supposed to be about equality and change. So.
Very good. That was good. Before we move on to questions, I just want to make one quick observation. When Professor Tate introduced the faculty members, it was a sort of air of sadness that Professor Ivan Van Sertima is not with us, who passed away. And Mrs. Van Sertima is in the audience. If you could just stand and... We miss Professor Van Sertima deeply. Now, there's mics on either ends. Mr. Jealous and the panelists has graciously agreed to a few questions. Mr. Jealous has to get on a train shortly. We want him to get to that meeting in Washington tomorrow. So, please, what I think we'll do, we'll take alternative questions, 2 at a time. You can direct it to any particular panelist or Mr. Jealous. So,
Professor Ramsamy, it's good to see you again.
Likewise.
Class of 1999. This is directed to the whole panel, but specifically to Mr. Jealous. We spoke earlier at the President's home about breaking those silos, removing the silos, and stopping the channel of young men of African-American descent going from schools to jails. As a on the front line, I'm a superintendent of the Juvenile Justice Commission, Fresh Start Residential, and one of the founding members of the newly found Warren and Sussex County chapter. I pose this question to you. What are we going to do to stop this? Thank you.
okay, we'll take one. Valerie, you could.
Okay. Well, first of all,
We'll take 2 questions at a time and then turn to the panel.
I wanted to say thank you because I'm an aspiring civil rights attorney and I interned for the ACLU, and I've been encouraged to start a chapter here at Rutgers, so you just gave me the motivation to do it. My question is, what's being done to encourage Black history education in public schools, not just for Black students, but for students across the board? Because I think that's one of the problems with my generation, why we aren't motivated to take stands to make change.
Okay, 2 questions on juvenile detention and Black history.
Sure, I'll defer the second one to President Harris. We actually have to attack the pipeline in multiple places, right? So, the school-to-prison pipeline is very much the focus of the NAACP as we start our second century, and it starts with failing schools, it ends in a burgeoning criminal justice system, and it extends through an economy that in many areas has been in permanent recession for 40 years, and it goes in a circle, right? So tomorrow, for instance, the work that we'll be doing with this major corporation to expand employment opportunity for formerly incarcerated people is both about the people coming out of prison who we don't want to see go back and making sure that they have jobs, but it's also about their kids. Because you don't get your kids out of foster care unless you can get a job. And some of the most motivated people not to reoffend are single mothers who are first-time drug offenders returning from prison. But they're also some of the most important to get employed, because when dad goes to prison, typically the family gets poorer, but when mom goes to prison, the family is typically broken up, right? So that's both something that's both at the end and the beginning. The end, if you will, for that mother, she's coming out of prison. The beginning for those children, who might be headed towards. And black children, I'd say, are 50%, less than much ever, 50% of the kids in foster care in this country. The only demographic that's massively overrepresented. On the front end, we have brought to the president's attention and it pays to have a black parent in the White House in a lot of ways, and got him personally interested in the problem of school arrest. Getting very direct. We're working on redesigning our whole approach to education advocacy at this moment, but in the meantime, we're focused on school arrest. After Columbine, I'm thinking school in Colorado, suburban school. President Clinton said, well, we want you to feel safe in your schools. So if you think that your school might be the place for the next Columbine, you can call DOJ and get a grant sent to your police department and have a school resource officer. Well, long story short, it's been many years, and there's a complete spatial mismatch between where the in-school shootings happen, and where the school resource officers go. In-school shootings tend to happen in places like Columbine, predominantly white, rural, suburban schools, and not so different from in-post office shootings in that way. But the officers have been going to the tough neighborhoods, the poor black and Latino neighborhoods, into the schools. And in those neighborhoods, you're more likely to get shot outside of school than in the school. Jurian Albert in Chicago, I was at his funeral a couple of weeks ago. He was beaten outside the school to death, not in the school. And so we're we're engaged in a conversation, which basically, essentially, the goal is to get the officers out of the school, get them walking a beat around the neighborhood. Kids get mugged, and they need protection outside the neighborhood, but get them out of the school because we've seen in district out of district similar situation. A conversation I had very quickly with a school resource officer in the Bay Area at a very embattled urban high school, and I said to him, how many kids do you arrest each week? He said, or each semester. He said, I arrest far fewer than the other officers at the school. And I said, that's understood, man. You seem like a reasonable brother. How many kids do you arrest each semester? He said, 15 or 16. That's one a week. He's arresting one a week. He's doing far fewer than the other officers at the school. So they're doing far more, and there's at least 2 of them. So 5 a week? So I said, well, how many of those? I said, what's the biggest reason that you arrest kids for? He said, biggest reason? I said, acts of defiance. I said, what's an act of defiance? And he went on to basically give me the criminal code for puberty. It was like persistent dress code violation, not backing up when I say back up. Stuff that I looked forward to, when I was in high school. So, and we're sending kids to jail for this, and we're giving them criminal records. So, we're attacking it in some very direct ways, but we're also, the last thing I say is our entire agenda, we're basically putting, the national office, putting sort of a poverty lens across and giving the most attention to the civil rights and human rights crises in this country that keep people in poverty, because that's ultimately the solution. Jobs, at the end of the day, is the biggest thing that we can do.
Mr. Harris?
On the issue of what's happening in terms of teaching African American history, I am very proud to say I am a charter member of the New Jersey Amistad Commission. And as of September 1, every public school teacher in the state of New Jersey has available web-based curriculum to include curriculum guides, interviews, as well as artifacts. So I would hope that all of you would join the NAACP, go to your local school board and says, when are they teaching it, and I want to see how it's done, because it is no longer a nice idea. It is now the law. Thanks to Assemblyman Bill Payne, with the support of the Black Legislative Caucus and other members of the legislature, that is now law. It is required to be taught as an integrated part of every curriculum in the state of New Jersey. Some of the faculty from the Africana Studies Department helped us to do this program, and we redesigned the core curriculum standard for the whole state of New Jersey. So it is required to be taught. As of September, you can go online and you can actually examine the resources yourself.
We'll just take 2 more questions, one from this side, and then we'll have to, Mr. Jealous has to leave, so just 2 more questions. I'm really sorry. We can continue the conversation at the reception very quickly.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Jealous.
Yes, sir.
My name's Phil Warner, and I'm president of the Gloucester County NAACP in southern New Jersey. To us, this is northern New Jersey.
Central.
I just want to say that we're doing some heavy lifting down there. We have found that unlike what our conference president, James Harris, just said, that we've got to go to these school boards and demand that, for instance, the Amistad curriculum be taught, that we have found that where the policies are being implemented is at the superintendent's level. We have a superintendent's roundtable. We have 24 townships and municipalities in Gloucester County, but we have 29 school districts. I don't know how that works, but what we know is that these people can delay, can defy, they can decide who gets hired. They have millions and millions of dollars available to them to implement school policy. And they pretty much do what they want.
Your question, sir.
We are at a, we are trying to get involved and at the table and provided access to the superintendent's roundtables in our county. And we think this can be duplicated all across the state. My question to you is, we have other stuff going on, but my question to you is, since our county can be, our county's policies can be duplicated in the deepest part of the South, and we're trying very hard to make things better, would you consider coming to our county and talking to our folks at our Freedom Fund? We don't have no money.
Thank you, sir. It's an invitation to you,
I'll
Mr.
definitely
Jealous.
consider it.
20
I'll definitely
seconds.
consider
20 seconds to the next question. Sorry.
Trevor Phillips, Livingston College, class of '97. I've had the pleasure of being a student of Professor Tate and many of the other esteemed faculty. Didn't get a chance to take your class, though. Sorry. My question to the panel is this. You spoke about, well, first thing I would question, Rutgers is not as progressive, because while you were at Columbia raising Cain, I was here raising Cain, getting locked up by the Board of Governors and so forth, and protesting against the former president, Mr. Lawrence. But Mr. McCormick hopefully is more, I guess, better to the Africana Studies Department, because the Africana Studies Department is very much needed here at Rutgers University. And, well, my question to you is this. You spoke about President Obama and the need to push and, you know, I guess urge the rest of Congress and so forth and get organized. I've had conversations with many people about supporting President Obama. And I had to make this comment, and I want to know what your take is, or anybody else on the panel, about support. Support does not mean blind allegiance, right? I think the most support that, or the best type of support that President Obama can use right now is a push. It's not about, oh, yes, you know, the flag waving, you know, banner toting type of support. But we need healthcare reform right now. We don't need, you know, a watered down version. We need all that stuff right now. Those progressive elements, I'm going to get you. The progressive elements of our community need to support President Obama by opening our mouths and telling him, this is what we elected you to do. We need you to make it happen ASAP, and we will support you. So my question to you would be, what can you do, or what would you advise folks that are trying to support President Obama?
Mr. Jealous has to leave right now. Otherwise, I'm going to give you the last 5 seconds.
Okay.
And you can speak as long as you want in order not to miss the train.
Sure. I got 3 minutes. Okay. So, you know, I'll certainly consider it, and you should call Wendy in my office, and we'll definitely consider it. If you put it in the summer, it's more likely I'll come to the Jersey Shore. I say he spent all of his summers in Cape May. I just, a good jest. With regards to pushing, you know, again, it's important for, it's easy for people to get caught in this thing where they sort of see Obama as like the great liberator, you know, and if change don't come, it's his fault, you know, and so we get mad at him and then we get dispirited, and the danger there is that then, you know, people, you know, say black, you know, say the black vote and the progressive vote generally is the same. So, you know, we aren't swing voters. We always vote for Democrat. No, we swing between voting and the couch, right? And if people feel dispirited, they just don't vote, right? we have to put pressure where pressure can make change, and where pressure can make change is on moderate or conservative Democrats, right? Because we don't really have any moderate Republicans left in Congress. I mean, there's 2 in Maine. If you live in Maine, by all means, go after Snow. And but that's the land of the lost. You know, we don't have moderate Republicans anywhere else. So, and if you can't, and that means, so for instance, like we bought ads in healthcare in like Louisiana, Arkansas, Florida, all targeted at blue dog senators to put pressure on them and to scare them with the specter, essentially, of black voters getting upset and not showing up. And we're getting ready right now to go after a bunch of blue dog Congress people because they count on black voters as a golf handicap, and they just assume that 90% of us in their district are going to vote for them. But they know that they got to get 90%, they got to get a certain level of turnout, or they're toast. And and we're talking to Republicans about supporting some of our agenda on the criminal justice side, and for instance, going after payday lenders, and quite frankly, with the hope that some of them will raise that in the midterm and turn up the heat from the other side and kind of flip the script on some of these Democrats who are supporting legalized loan sharking. That's how you support Obama. And it's counterintuitive, right? Because you want to just call the guy up and be like, what the heck, man? We had a contract. You said no. Congress, if there's a problem, it's a problem in the Congress. And it means also, quite frankly, that folks, a lot of folks gave money to a candidate for the first time. Again, be aware of who the obstacles are. Be up on your issues, and then give money to people who will spend money in those places. It may not be where you live, to turn up the heat. Where heat needs to be turned up. But you're absolutely right. It's not blind allegiance, and it's certainly not believing that every time, for instance, that he makes a pronouncement as president, that's where his heart is, or what he was arguing for 15 minutes earlier. I'll give you an example, and then I'll thank everybody, and I do got a dash. Financial services regulatory reform is moving, right? There's a whole reform of the banking industry, set up a consumer financial protection agency. The president and I both wanted to see part of that be a national cap on payday lenders. We had done one for military families a couple of years ago, brought the rate down to 36%, still an exorbitant rate, but it's nowhere near 390 or 1955%. And Barney Frank said by no means, because he said he just couldn't get the blue dogs on board, right? He's the head of the banking committee. So what did the president do? He only allowed one victim of predatory lending to speak at the press conference, and it was a 62-year-old retired nurse who was a victim who had paid $2,500 in fees on a $500 payday loan without a dollar going towards principal. And said a very clear message to that industry that you're next. And as he was walking out, we shook heads, and I said, thanks, and he just kind of winked at me. He said, we'll get this done. We have a president who is more progressive than the Congress, and the only way that we get the country to catch up with where this president wants to lead us is we've got to turn up the heat, including on many Democrats in the Congress. With that, I want to say thank you to all of you. I want to thank my friend Doug Greenberg for having me. Thanks, Doug. Thank President McCormick, and thank the department, and congratulations on 40 years at Columbia. I think our department's turning like 13 years, so in many ways you are more progressive.
Thank you very much,
Don't forget to vote on November the 3rd.
Yes.
There's some refreshments outside, and join us for other programs. Thank you very much.